together as we open up the Word of God together. Well, today is Thursday, and we have been in a passage in the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 9, verses 27 through 35. We're coming to the end of a series that we had called Power. And as part of this series, what we have noted is that Jesus has been performing a number of miracles that are just underscoring his authority, manifesting that he truly is the Messiah that was promised, this anointed one, this figure in ancient history that the prophets and seriously all the way back to Moses, there are always these references of one who is going to come to be this great redeemer. Ever since the humanity has fallen, and now they are in the world as we know it, right? Even the presence of evil and sin present in this world all around us. The biblical record says this is a result of the fall, this breach of union that took place between God and humanity. And people, they want to fill in the blanks as to why the world is in the state that it is. And some people will point to, the fruit that they see, right? So they can talk about prejudice, and they can talk about hate and envy and jealousies. They could talk about maybe a lack of education, a lack of resources, and to a certain level, right? Many of these things are true, but the Bible describes the real root of the cause of all this is a rebellion against the very one who created all things, so that mankind finds themselves at odds with the very God who created what we see, and in our rebellion, we have gone our own way. The consequence of that, it says, is that sin has entered the world. And what God has done, it says, basically, okay, you don't want to do it my way, you want to do it your way, well, have at it. Let me know how that works for you. And over the centuries, we have seen that all it has done is it has demonstrated time and time again the human depravity that is present in each and every one of us. That proclivity to be a little bit more self-centered, to be focused on me and mine. And what God is doing is constantly calling us to live a more abundant life. And in sending his son Jesus, he has given us not only this model, but he is also giving us a Savior, one who says, I have come out of my love for the world to give my life a ransom. I will build that breach that has been broken. I will repair it so that you and God could be once again in fellowship with one another. That because of my sacrifice on your behalf, I will give you then my spirit in you. And that is a spirit of power and a spirit of love and a spirit of self-discipline. And he says, and if you walk in my way, truly you will be the light of the world. You will be the salt of the earth. And this is what, as believers, we read, and it challenges us to take that look within. It's like Jesus. Remember in the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus would say that, he says, do not judge lest you be judged. For with the same judgment you use, it will be used against you. And then he says, but first, take the log that's out of your own eye before you attempt to take the speck out of your brother's. See, it always has to begin with us. This isn't always about pointing out all the faults and sins of the world. God is also asking us to do this moment of reflection where we take a look at ourselves and make sure that our motivations are pure, that we are really seeking to his kingdom and his righteousness, just like the prayer. Remember when Jesus said, "Let me tell you how one should pray," and he says, "Begin this way: Our Father, who is in heaven, your name be hallowed. Your kingdom come. Your will be done on earth as it is in heaven." See, the whole orientation is one that's upward, that's looking to the heavens, is asking God to be a part of this life of mine, to help me to focus on God's agenda. Because what it does is it pulls me outside of mine. It elevates my framework so that now I begin to live this life in a way that is pleasing to God. So, as we've been going through all of these miracles in Matthew chapter 8 and 9, we're coming to an end now, and one of the last miracles that we see here is Jesus healing two blind men and a demon-possessed man who is mute. In this, Jesus interacts in particular with the two blind men, and he asks them, the blind men refer to Jesus as the Son of David, and as referring to him as the Son of David, it is a title that was given to the Redeemer, right? The Anointed One, the Messiah that was to come. And so we paused for a moment and began to look at what that title really was all about. And this title came with very many descriptives of what this Messiah would do and how he would do it. And many of those references have been referred to in the Gospel of Matthew, and we have looked back on many of them. But here are blind men who, by Jesus' words and by his deeds, have come to a conclusion that this must be the Messiah that was promised. And if he is, then he could do something about my blindness. And so they come asking and seeking and knocking, and Jesus answers. And Jesus says, in response to your faith, you'll be healed. And so this started me thinking, and then in this beginning of this week, about this one question, and that is, what is true faith? Because if we're not careful, we make the miracles of Jesus conditional upon how much faith I have. So if my faith is this much, it's not going to work. It's got to be that high for this to work. And yet, we've also seen many miracles where, like, think about early in the passage, the centurion came seeking a miracle for one of his servants. And Jesus commended the faith of the Roman centurion, and his servant was healed. But it didn't say anything about the faith that the servant had. It was the demonstration that this Roman centurion, a Gentile, one who was a part of the military machine of Rome, he comes to Jesus and recognizes in Jesus an authority. And Jesus, it says in the text in chapter 8, that he was astonished by this man's faith. And he said to his disciples, he says, I have not seen such faith in all of Israel. So the idea that they saw in Jesus this sense of power, they saw this sense of authority, that is what brings us to Jesus looking for answers. So it's not like it's not my faith that is necessarily bringing the healing, but it's the faith in the one who can bring that healing. And that's what the blind men demonstrated. That's what the leper demonstrated. That's what the Roman centurion demonstrated. And so we see in all of these miracles that Jesus is stepping into this role that he has as Messiah. And what the gospel writer Matthew is trying to convey to you and me is that we ought to take confidence in this. So we looked at a passage in Hebrews 11:1, right? And in this passage, it talked about faith is the confidence of things hoped for and the assurance of things not yet seen. Well, you could be confident and assured if the one in whom you have placed your confidence and assurance is worthy. And that's the faith that now we are giving to Jesus, saying that we believe that he is able to do exceeding abundant beyond all that we can think or imagine. what we're reading about him in his words and his deeds, it is all pointing us to the place where you begin to see that Jesus actually is living out what he has said for generations after generation. In his words, they ring true, and in his demonstrations of power and compassion, his goodness as well as his glory is what begins to attract us more and more to Jesus. So this passage, and then in verse 6, it says, "For without faith it is impossible to please God. For those who come to him must believe that he is, and that he is a rewarder of those who diligently seek him." That's all that God is really asking. So this idea of what is true faith is demonstrating that Jesus is the Messiah, and that I believe that in pursuit of him, I will experience something of this life abundant. And that faith that I have in Jesus is what brings me a sense of confidence, and what it brings me a sense of assurance. Not in my own performance, not about like, oh, I got it all together now. No, it's about the fact that Jesus has it all together. And as a result, he is coming and speaking to you and me of all of this righteousness that God is going to bring into one's life. We looked at a comparison of that in John chapter 8, when Jesus says, "I am the light of the world. He who walks in me will never walk in darkness." And it began this contentious, conversation with the religious leaders of the day, resulting in Jesus manifesting himself as the Son of God. But it says, those around them, there were many who believed, and yet there were others who were ready to pick up stones to stone him because he made himself equal with God. So you begin to see, as Jesus is beginning to unfold his true identity, people are going to be on different sides of this issue. So that was another side of, here is faith being exhibited, but it's not this true faith, right? People, they're still buying into their own presuppositions. They're not really willing to give Jesus the faith that the confidence that he is who he says he is, and that contentiousness begins. So I thought I would take an Old Testament, example of that in 1 Kings chapter 19, and I started talking to you about a passage in 1 Kings chapter 19, where there is this confrontation between King Ahab and God's prophet Elijah. And I'm just going to put on the screen here a map, and I'm just going to walk you through a couple of things that we have been speaking about. First, I want you to notice in this map that this is the kingdom of Israel. And as you see in those two colored portions, one represents Israel, which is the northern kingdom, and the southern kingdom of Judah. So we're at a period of time when, instead of it being a united kingdom, we have found that it's been fractured. And in that fracturing, we have found that it has torn the nation apart, and it has separated God's people. And as a result, the northern kingdom would have a series of kings that all of whom will prove to be wicked. Eventually, God is going to bring the nation to the north of Israel, the Assyrians. They're going to come down and they're going to just wipe out this northern kingdom. About 150 years later, we're going to find that the Babylonians are going to come. And not only are they going to overcome the Assyrians, they eventually are going to overcome the southern kingdom, Judah, because the people, they have just given themselves over, becoming more and more assimilated to the people around them, and have ceased to be the people that God had called them to be. There was this judgment in throughout the Old Testament. You'll read about this exile that took place. Now, many of the books in your Old Testament are either, either warning people of what's going to happen, like the books of Habakkuk. You get the books of Joel and Amos. All these Old Testament books. Yeah, this is all couched around these periods when God is sending word, trying to get people to become more and more aware. But it's not really happening. So, what we also see taking place here is that there was this king that arose, and his name is Ahab. And it says in chapter 19 that Ahab did more evil in the eyes of the Lord than any of those before him. He not only considered it trivial to commit the sins of Jeroboam. Now I want you to just notice that for a minute, sins of Jeroboam, right? So obviously this is something that was not good, right? But he says, but he also married Jezebel. Jezebel would be the daughter of the king of the Sidonians, one of those seacoast towns. And he says, and he began to serve Baal and worship him. So here he is now. He's no longer living by God's decrees, right? 10 Commandments, thou shalt have no other gods before me, thou shalt make no graven images to bow down before them. Yeah, he is throwing all of this to the wind. And now you see, here is the king of Israel, Ahab, this northern kingdom. And what is he doing? He's committing the sins of Jeroboam. He's married Jezebel, the daughter of this foreign pagan king. He began to serve Baal, worship him. And then notice the summary statement here. Ahab did more to provoke the Lord, the God of Israel, to anger than did all of Israel. Just a quick note, when it talked about the sin of Jeroboam, you see on the screen here, I put this little map where is Bethel is on the is the southern end of the nation of Israel, the northern kingdom, and Dan is all the way up at the top. What Jeroboam did was he created altars there, and those two altars were meant to be substitute for the altar that God had decreed, which was in Jerusalem in the temple. And God had decreed that throughout the calendar year that the Israelites would come and they would worship in Jerusalem, in this temple, the place where God had said he had placed his name. And yet, Jeroboam violated that and caused the people to engage even in more idolatrous actions. And it seems like Ahab just followed suit. So now we come to this confrontation. This confrontation here we find with Elijah will come to Mount Carmel, and he will have a confrontation with the prophets of Baal. And there God will show himself mighty and powerful. And so Ahab will leave, and he will go to this one town called Jezreel. While he's in Jezreel, the very next day, after this great big victory that King Ahab, has, that Elijah has over the false prophets of Baal, word is sent to him from Jezebel, saying that may the God deal with me, be it ever so severely, if by this time tomorrow I do not make your life like one of them. And then it says, this prophet, Elijah, who not only stood up to Ahab and not only stood up to the prophets of Baal, but now by the threat of this woman, Jezebel, it says Elijah was afraid and ran for his life. And where did that go? So he leaves Jezreel and he goes all the way to Beersheba, right? A distance of about 55 miles, and then there he goes into another day's journey, about another 30 some odd miles, all the way down to where the star is on this map, which is out into the desert. And what he does is he runs as far away as he can. Do you catch that? That's what we find Elijah doing. And so this is kind of where we left it off yesterday, and we were talking about how geography rarely turns a good day bad. It will rarely do that. We think that if we just get a change of scenery, right? Well, if I move, I get a new job. But more times than not, those problems that we have, they're going to come with us. Elijah is going to find that out. Elijah is going to discover that, he has, he may have run away, but he hasn't run away from his problems. And so here we find in this text that we're saying, okay, well, why did he run away? That's the big question, right? And we realized that there was this big confrontation that he just finished having with the prophets of Baal. So maybe he's tired. Maybe that fatigue has come in, and as I mentioned yesterday, that fatigue makes cowards of us all. Sometimes you just get worn down. You just lack the willpower, the physical, stamina just to keep going, and we need some rest. Maybe that's why he ran away. But there's something in the text here that, if you look in 1 Kings chapter 19, you find that Elijah is saying, "Look, I have had enough." He says, I am no better than my ancestors. He prayed that he might die, and so he goes, like 130 miles away. Now he's sitting under this broom tree, and there he just prays out to God, saying, "Look, I've had enough. Take my life. I'm no better than my ancestors." And I want to suggest to you that in that phrase there, when he says, "I am no better than my ancestors," I believe that Elijah is expressing some really deep disappointment. Elijah is referring to his inability to oust Baal worship from the land. See, he had just had this great contest. He thought he won. I mean, think about different things in your life where, you're working really hard, and then all of a sudden you get to this place and you think, okay, well, finally now we're going to turn this corner. And then you get all excited about it. Everybody is like really celebrating. And then what happens? You turn around and recognize, that didn't happen the way that, the results weren't what I thought they were going to be. And man, when that happens, doesn't it just take the wind out of your sails? Doesn't it just like cause you to just sit back and go, "Oh my goodness, I thought this was done. I thought we won." See, this is I think what is going on in Elijah's life when he's saying, "I'm no better than my ancestors," because he thought that his actions were going to bring about this decisive victory. What I hope I've been making clear to you is that this confrontation with Ahab and Elijah, which was provoked by God, right? Because God had caused a drought to come onto the land for 3 years. So there was this tension between Ahab and Elijah. God provided for Elijah. God gave Elijah a platform. And now he comes back and defeats, these prophets of Baal, thinking that maybe now the fidelity of Israel would be made manifest. They're going to come back to God. They're going to leave all this false worship. We're going to be back in harmony again with God. And then all of a sudden you just see that Jezebel is threatening his life. Now, we're talking about true faith, right? And what I'm trying to give here is a negative example of this, in the sense that where it is obvious that Elijah is disappointed, and that disappointment has led him to despair. "I've had enough. Take my life, Lord. I'm no better than my ancestors." And I believe because he's looking back and seeing that all the other prophets before him, they weren't able to rid the land of this idolatry. They couldn't woo the heart back of his people. Elijah thought, "Hey, man, I just did this. This should be done." But it didn't turn out the way he thought. And so in discouragement, fatigued. He runs away as far as he can get. And then notice here in 1 Kings 5, 19, 1 Kings chapter 19, verse 5, he says, all at once an angel touched him and said, get up and eat. He looked around, and there was by his head a cake of bread baked over hot coals and a jar of water. He ate and drank, and then he lay down again. The angel of the Lord came back a second time and touched him and said, get up and eat, for the journey is too much for you. So he got up and ate and drank. Strengthened by that food, he traveled, listen to this, 40 days and 40 nights until he reached Horeb, the mountain of God. And there he went into a cave and spent the night. So, what are we to get out of this? Well, first of all, I'm going to give you another map again. See, that star up on the top of this map represents where Elijah is now by this broom tree out in the wilderness. And then what does he do? He travels another 60 miles from that place all the way down towards the tip of the Sinai Peninsula to what in this text is called Horeb, the mountain of God. Mount Horeb is another name for Mount Sinai. Anybody remember what happens on Mount Sinai? Yeah, chances are Elijah it's interesting that he's in the same desert that's been traversed by Moses and the children of Israel. He's in probably the same mountain where Moses was first called by God. You remember when Moses saw that burning bush, and it wouldn't surprise me if it wasn't also perhaps even the same cave that Moses may have hid himself in. And what am I referring to? Well, there's this text, and I'll just read it to you. It's found in Exodus chapter 33, 21 through 23, and it says this. It says, then the Lord said, there is a place near me where you may stand on a rock. When my glory passes by, I will put you in a cleft in the rock and cover you with my hand until I have passed by. Then I will remove my hand, and you will see my back, but my face must not be seen. Moses wanted to see God, and God says, you can't look upon me, but I'll put you in the cleft of this rock, and my form will pass by you. What I'm suggesting to you is that here is Elijah, and one of the things that I hope that you see from just reading this text is that Elijah just finished traveling, right? Over 100 miles away, like about 130 miles away, is under this broom tree, is crying out to God, just saying, "I want to die. I thought I won this contest, and now here is Jezebel trying to kill me." He says, I'm done. And as he goes to sleep, who wakes him up but an angel of God? Can I just remind you that even on a bad day, God still has his eye on us? You catch that? Even on a bad day, God still has his eye on you. Elijah is fed and rested. God knows where he is. Elijah traveled 60 miles to Mount Sinai, and there he sits, and then God has a question for him. He says, "What are you doing here, Elijah? What are you doing here? Last I looked, you were up in Jezreel, and now Elijah is all the way down here in Mount Sinai." And Elijah is this mighty prophet of God, and here he is on Mount Horeb. Why have you left your post? It can't possibly be Jezebel, is it? What are you really after, Elijah? And then let me end with this today. But in verse 10, he says this, "I have been very zealous for the Lord God Almighty." This is verse 10 of 1 Kings 19. "The Israelites have rejected your covenant, broken down your altars, put your prophets to death with the sword. I'm the only one left, and now they're trying to kill me too." You see, Elijah's acting like he knows everything that's going on, doesn't he? He's figured it out. This isn't working. I'm the only one that's working, and things aren't happening the way I think they should be. So he's run away, and now he's just revealing again the depths of his despair, basically saying, God, you're not doing enough, and why aren't you doing more? And implied in all this is Elijah's basically, in his confusion, is just saying, God, all this is your fault. Have you ever felt like that? Have you ever allowed sometimes your faith to get so frail that after a while we're pointing our fingers back up to God and saying, God, this is all on you. I've done my part. I've done what you asked, and now this is how I'm getting repaid. Forget this. I'm done. Maybe that faith that we are exercising is a faith of our own assumption. Maybe we're thinking that we know too much, and God is going to have to show us another path. My friends, this is what this text is all about. And I'd like for you to come and join me tomorrow, and we're going to bring this story to its conclusion. But we found Elijah thinking that geography might be his answer, but he still brought his problems with him. And we found that his disappointment has left him to a place of real despair, to the place where now he's become an accuser of God himself, saying, basically, God, this is on you. Let's see how God answers him tomorrow, Lord willing, as we come together for another Seize the Day. But I hope it's becoming clear God is calling us into a relationship with him in the midst of a fallen world. There's going to be a lot of confusion that goes around us, but he's given us his word. He's given us his purposes so that we can know them. We can walk with a little bit more confidence. There is no place that a man can hide that the Lord cannot see him. In the midst of his despair, God was present, and God fed him. My friends, let that help you to seize the day, and remember that God is good all the time. God bless.